A lot has been going on around here lately. So I figured it was actually a good time to just do a good old-fashioned FAQ session. I reached out to y'all on Instagram and YouTube and asked you for just any and all questions, whether it's related to milling with freshly milled flour, baking, cooking from scratch, personal things, whatever it is. And wow, did y'all ask me a ton of questions. Hey y'all, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, and on this channel, I teach you all about real whole grains from a biblical perspective. I teach you how to be milling your wheat, baking, cooking from scratch, and more. Okay, so I had so many questions from y'all, and unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to answer all of them because of just how many they were, and some of them were very detailed. So we're just going to get started. We're actually going to start with any and all bread baking related type questions, milling, those type of things. And then I'm going to go into my personal questions that I received. And we're going to end with the number one question that I received from so many of y'all. Okay, so question number one, what is the best manually powered grain mill? Very timely considering we are now in hurricane season here in Florida. And so having a good mill that is manual certainly can come in handy. And honestly, so far, one of the best is the Wonder Junior mill, the Wonder Junior Deluxe grain mill. I actually did a full review about it. You can check that up here. But it is actually a really good manual. It is solid. And I actually also did a video last hurricane that we received that we were out of power for an entire week, and I actually did bake bread. I milled it all by hand, and we actually baked it in the grill. It was a fun experiment. And so I can say that it takes a long time, but that actually is a really good one. It is, basically the same price as an electric grain mill, but it will do the job, and I'm confident that it would last in a true grid down situation. There are cheaper manual mills, but they are typically more plastic parts, and I'm not sure how long that they would last. Now, there are also really expensive manual mills like the Diameme or the Country Living mill that are like $1,000, and I personally have never tried them, but I've heard great things about them. Truly like a grid down situation for sure. But a happy medium for me is my Wonder Junior Deluxe grain mill. It is also really great for milling coffee beans. When you don't have power and your grinder's not working, you need to mill coffee beans by hand, and you can do that too. So question number two actually was dealing with honey. I was surprised by this question because I had a few of y'all ask me about honey. Is it better to bake with local raw honey, or does it really matter since we're actually baking with the honey and thus cooking it? And I've actually never really thought of this, but it kind of makes sense, the fact that we are going to be baking the honey. You probably are losing some of the benefits of it being truly raw, because logically speaking, it's baking at 350 degrees. It's probably not truly raw honey anymore. So I always buy local honey, mainly because I love to support my local honey farmers. It tends to actually be a bit cheaper than buying honey from the store, and I'm able to buy it like the half gallon or the gallon size. And most of it is raw, just because that's generally how local honey producers sell it. So I do recommend the local raw honey, mainly because, again, you're supporting your local bee farmers, and I do recommend that. However, I've also used store-bought honey in a pinch. No problem. I'm not really going for the health benefits of honey when I'm using it in my bread. I'm mainly going for it for being a more natural type sweetener. So whether it's raw or not kind of doesn't matter to me. Okay, question number three. This is a general question that I got several different times, but basically it's best sources for why to switch from gluten-free to milling wheat for health benefits. And I've done a few videos about this. I will link my most recent one up here, and any links I will also link in the description box down below. But basically, as far as sources go, it's kind of just, I've done a lot of videos about it, where, those that are going from gluten-free, many people who are gluten sensitive, it's mainly the store-bought flour, the dead stuff, the fake stuff that you're buying from the store. That is nothing but really gluten and starch. And many people are able to handle freshly milled wheat because then you're actually having the gluten the way God intended with all the fiber and the nutrients and everything like that. So as far as my best sources, I will link some of the videos down below that I've already done for you. And in those videos, I'm linking sources. I talk about in the videos the health benefits, the differences, things like that. But do know, even if you choose to stay gluten-free, I do recommend you still consume whole grains, which there are plenty of gluten-free whole grains that you can still consume. Okay, so this actually leads to question number 4. Can you share some of the research sources you use to draw your conclusions? Those are kind of I got a few of these asking for my sources. Do know that every single video I do where I'm talking about something specific, something more scientific-y, I do always like to link my sources in the description box of that particular video. So for example, I did a video about MTHFR gene mutation, and I linked a lot of sources in that video. In many of my videos, I link the sources there. But overall, actually some really good resources. If you're looking for just articles, I can go in and tell you, if you go to Breadbeckers, so breadbeckers.com, Sue Becker has written several articles, things like on phytic acid, the benefits of vitamin E, the benefits of home milling, things like that. So if you're actually wanting articles to read, that's a good place to start. Otherwise, if it's something specific, find a video that I've probably done on it, and most likely my sources are in that video because I get them from various and sundry places. Question number 5, big, huge question so many of y'all asked, and this is something that I frequently see over and over again: crumbly bread. I bake the bread. Why is my bread crumbly? There are many different issues that can contribute to this. So we're gonna first break it down to 2 ways. So if your bread is crumbling like the day of or the day after you have baked it, there are solutions to that. If it's crumbling a few days later, there are solutions to that. So first of all, if you are noticing that your bread is crumbly like the day that you bake it, or maybe just the day after you bake it, here are my suggestions. And unfortunately, it's not just here's the one thing that you need to do and your problems are all solved. This does take some experimentation. So first of all, you do want to make sure that you have a good recipe that is using 100% freshly milled wheat. Secondly, you want to make sure that you have kneaded that dough sufficiently. But ultimately, I think where the problem lies is with the shaping and the folding technique that is used to create that loaf. You want to make sure that your loaf, first of all, the dough, I liked it to be slightly tacky, where it's kind of soft, but slightly tacky. And then whenever I am shaping that dough, I'm shaping it in a very specific way where it's kind of tight on the, it's rolled up where kind of tight on the inside, and you have that tightness on the upper part of it where it's gonna rise well, everything come together very well on the inside. So I think a lot of it is the shaping issue, making sure that you're shaping that bread well. Kind of tied into is making sure that it's also baked, that it's baked well. You want to make sure that the loaf is fully baked, and you want to make sure that you wait for that loaf to completely cool down before slicing into it. These are all little different factors. So if you want to just check to make sure your loaf is baked enough, that's usually to 190 degrees Fahrenheit, internal temperature of the bread. For me, 350 degrees, 35 minutes. Usually does it for me. But I think the shaping and the folding technique is kind of where it starts. Making sure that loaf is baked, making sure the loaf is completely cooled down before slicing it. And I think those are the main issues with crumbly bread. Another issue, and this is mainly affecting for if it's like maybe day 2 or day 3 and it's crumbling, is how you're storing the loaf. You want to make sure your loaf is not drying out, because obviously if it dries out, you're going to have more crumbs because the loaf has dried out. So you just want to make sure it's in some sort of airtight container, whether it's a plastic bag, a bread bag, something like that. So there you go. But in my experience, I think the crumbly issue, again, I think it really goes back to how you're shaping that dough before baking it. So unfortunately, not a one easy fix. You have to experiment with it a bit more. All right, question number 6, do you adjust your milling size based upon the grain that you're using, corn excluded? And so I'm assuming they mean whenever I'm adjusting the fineness on my grain mill for the grains, does it depend on what grain I'm using? This is kind of a yes and no question. It does depend on the grain mill. Ultimately, I'm just going for a fine flour for bread baking. And so wherever I'm needing to adjust that to get that, that's where I'm at, no matter what type of grain. Now, I do notice there are grain mills like the Nutri-Mill Impact where you may need to, it looks like you're going for a coarser grind, mainly so you can open up that hopper so the grains can fit. You need this for the larger grains like kamut or maybe dried beans, especially your dried corn, where you're still gonna get a fine flour, but opening up to where it's more coarse of a grind. It's mainly just opening up where the grains can fit in, but still getting a fine flour. Hope that makes sense. So basically, I put it on the finest setting I can, put my grains in, and if it's milling, great. If the grains aren't going through, that means you need to kind of open it up a little bit or put it on a more slightly coarser grind in order for the grains to fit in, but you're still gonna end up with a fine flour. I really hope that makes sense. But generally speaking, for pretty much all of my grains, it's just a fine grind that I do. Okay, number 7, best way to store sandwich loaf to keep fresh as possible. Okay, so this is gonna depend on what you're wanting to achieve. If you're wanting to your bread to last longer, well actually, let's back up. First of all, the number one thing, no matter what, is you wanna make sure that your bread is stored in some sort of airtight container or bag. Personally, I do like my bread to either be stored in plastic bread bags, plastic Ziploc bags, or one of my like Rubbermaid containers that's pretty well sealed and that keeps the air out. Air is the enemy to your bread because it dries it out, things like that. So that's the first step when storing your loaf. Now, if you're for doing it this way here in Florida with our humidity and it's now summertime, I can usually go 3 or 4 days on the counter, just fine for regular sandwich loaf breads. If I'm wanting to last longer, I still will use like a plastic bread bag or some sort of airtight container. But if you put it in your fridge, it will make it last longer, but you still want it to be airtight because it will still dry out in the fridge. If it's where it might last longer in the fridge, but it'll dry it out. So that way you still want an airtight, some kind of container for even if you store it in the fridge, but you can actually have it up to a week with it being in the fridge. All right, number 8, I had a few of y'all ask me this, what is my favorite grain mill? And that's like choosing one of my favorite children. It just cannot be done. I do own 5 grain mills. You do not need 5. But bottom line, ultimately, I would say for me, I love having an impact grain mill that gives me fine flour every single time with a push of a button. And I also love having one of my stone grind mills where I can have those coarser grains so I can make my grits and cream of wheat. So I actually really like having both. As far as choosing which one is my favorite, I don't really have a favorite because they're just really good grain mills. As I've said before, if you're going with top-notch companies like the Nutri-Mill, Mock Mill, Wonder Mill, or Como Mill, I don't think you're really going to be disappointed because they are all very well-established companies, good warranties, and all of their grain mills are really great. So I do have the Wonder Mill Impact grain mill. I have the Nutri-Mill Harvest Stone grind mill. Those are the 2 mills I use the most, and I love them. I do. I love them. All right, question number 9, how to make gravy with freshly milled flour. I'm also gonna tie this in to how to make breading for like if you're frying chicken, something like that, because these 2 are kind of similar. And honestly, it's a one-to-one swap. Use it as normal. If you are used to making gravy from scratch with store-bought flour, just swap it out for the same amount of freshly milled flour. Same when it comes to having some sort of breading for frying chicken, things like that. Now, I will say this, my favorite wheat to use is a soft white wheat, because you cannot, and that's mainly because you just can't really see the bran in that wheat. It's a bit whiter and softer and smoother of a flour. So I find if I use like a hard red or hard white wheat, especially in my gravy, I find that you can kind of see a graininess to it. The gravy itself is smooth. It looks grainy because you're seeing the bran in that flour. So I prefer to use like a soft white wheat. Kamut or Corazon would also work. I have not tried spelt. That may work, but especially with soft white wheat, it's a mild flavor. It's not going to mess up, not going to give you a wonky flavor in your gravy or your breading. And same thing with Kamut. So those are really good ones to use, but honestly, just make it as you normally do. Just swap it out for freshly milled. All right, number 10, I'd like to know your schedule as far as feeding your family. Do you bake bread and all the things once a week or as needed? So I have a very large family. Whenever I'm baking loaves, I'm baking about 5 at a time, and that's every 2 or 3 days that I'm having to bake that much. We're a huge consumer of grains around here, and I bake as needed. Now, I'm a stay-at-home mom. I am a homeschooling mom, and so I am here, and I also just have a good enough routine where I'm able to do that. I've got the right machines and equipment to help me where, I can throw it in, have it be kneading, I'm walking away, doing other things, and I'm able to kind of fit it into my day because I'm already here at the house. So that's what's easier for me. For those of you who may be working outside the home, or maybe just not at home a lot, or maybe a smaller family, that's where things like your bread machines can really come in handy. The ability to freeze the bread, or to at least bake in large batches and maybe put in the fridge, and that be what you have for the week. That's completely doable as well. Just personally for me, we like fresh bread, and I'm able to do it. I'm blessed to be able to do it at home. And so that's what I do. Now, one hack that I do love to do, I'll go ahead and share with you, is because I use the same recipe for rolls that I do for my bread loaves. What I love to do is, say around 3 o'clock, I start baking my big batch, mama batch. And then I go ahead and make rolls that we'll have for supper that night, because we love those fresh, hot out of the oven. But then I turn the rest of them into loaves. So that way, when we want rolls, but I also need bread, I'm doing that in at one time, and not like, okay, I baked bread earlier in the day and then I'm making loaves for supper that night. You can do it in one batch. Just time it right, where whenever you're gonna have supper. So those rolls are good, hot and fresh, and I'm usually just pulling out the loaves of bread. The timer goes off, I get up from the table, pull them out of the oven, let them sit there, get back to supper. And then I've got the bread loaves for later and the fresh rolls at night. Okay, question number 11. I'm trying to get through these super fast. How to get moist muffins without using bananas. My muffins dry out fast. Honestly, I think the key with the muffins is using honey. I find that using honey gives me nice moist muffins, no matter what type I'm making. If I use cane sugar, they're gonna be they are gonna be slightly drier. So I do think the honey is kind of the key when it comes to your muffins. All right, number 12, do you freeze your flour if you have extra after milling? So I've done a video about this, about what I do with leftover flour. And this really just kind of depends, but yes, absolutely. What is a good way to do it is I label it, put it in the freezer. And so that way, whenever the next time I need I just need a cup of flour, or I need 1 or 2 tablespoons for a gravy or something like that, I just use the flour that's in that freezer. So that way I'm not wasting it. It's really handy to have. It's also great for feeding your sourdough starters, because I don't like to pull out, to mill for only like half a cup of flour to feed a sourdough starter. I already have that milled and ready to go. All right, number 13, have you made fresh pasta with freshly milled flour? I have. It is a huge labor of love. I don't do it a lot. Now, I haven't done a video yet. Where I show how to make pasta is actually in my Kamut course that I have. If you didn't know about it, I did a course all about using 100% freshly milled Kamut or Corazon. You can check that out on my website. I will link it down below as well. And in there, I do a full in-depth tutorial about how to make pasta, because I do find that Kamut or Corazon makes the best pasta. All right, question number 15 really was all about storing the grains. How do I store them, especially with humidity, all the things. I have done a full video about that. I will link that up here and down below. But bottom line is when it comes to storing grains, with the exception of oats, corn, and rice, you just need a good container with a good lid to keep out moisture and pest. Moisture and pest are your enemy. So currently I keep my grains in buckets with sealed lids out in my shed that is uninsulated, and I'm out here in Florida with the humidity and the heat and everything, and I don't have any problems. Again, the exceptions would be corn, brown rice, and oat groats, because the corn and the rice are a bit more starchy, and they're just not gonna store as long. So you either want oxygen absorbers or freeze those grains beforehand. And oat groats, you just wanna make sure you're buying them from a source that say they have been stabilized or maybe even toasted. That means that they're stabilized in order for them to store a bit longer, because they have the oil on the outside and they're gonna cause those grains to become more rancid. So they stabilize them to help them last longer. All right, question number 16. When is your cookbook coming out? And I can now say it is out. I am so excited to finally say that the Grains and Grit Cookbook, the very first one, has now been published, and currently you can purchase it on Amazon. So be sure to check that out, and I will link that down there below. For those of you who have already purchased, thank you so very much. Leave reviews whenever you've had a chance to look over it and everything. But I'm so excited to actually announce on YouTube now that the Grains and Grit Cookbook is finally available. It was crazy how many hoops we had to jump through to get that thing published, but we did it. Okay, so let's go into some personal questions that I was asked. Not too many of those. Most of y'all were asking more bread-related questions. But the first one was basically what homeschool method do we use? And that is actually more of a classical method. We are actually part of Classical Conversations. We have been for several years now. I've been a tutor the whole time. I was a foundations tutor. I'm now about to go into my 4th year tutoring essentials, and I love it. So that is pretty much more of our method that we use. Is definitely more of a classical style of education. Second question I received is actually wanting to know my personal testimony. How did I become a Christian? And I'm going to try to keep this short, but basically I was raised in church. I had a great family. I made a profession of faith whenever I was younger. I was baptized, but, and then I was a good church girl growing up, but then not so much whenever I was an older teenager and then got into college, and definitely was not living a life for the Lord. And I then became friends with a guy who is now my husband. And we got into a debate one night actually over gender roles, biblical gender roles of all things. We were really debating that. And it was that night that I broke. And really for me, it really came down to an authority issue. And I truly had not placed the Lord as my true authority in my life. And at this time, I actually thought I was just rededicating my life to the Lord. But then a couple years later, I realized, that probably was whenever I was truly saved. Because if you look at the fruit of my life before then, I was not living a life that someone who was truly born again would be living. And so that's whenever I was truly born again, I walked away from the lifestyle that I was living. God truly changed me that night. This is back whenever I was in college, and my husband, my friend at the time, started discipling me and eventually realized he couldn't live without me. And a few years later we got married, and fast forward to now, and we have a lot of kids. And so it's really interesting. I can say that my husband led me to the Lord, but he just wasn't my husband at the time. And I've been following him ever since, and following the Lord ever since as well. And it truly has been a life-changing, it's been life-changing. It really has, to really see what true religion, true Christianity really is. Now, the final question was actually the question I was asked the most by y'all. And that was, how is my husband doing how are we doing? So if this is your very first video you've watched of me, my husband was shot 5 times by our neighbor back in March of this year, March 2025. So as of now, that's 3.5 months or so ago. He had to completely, lots of surgery, big abdominal surgery to basically redo his plumbing. But the main thing that is now left is one of the bullets did where it hit his spine. He is paralyzed from the waist down. And as of recording this video, he is still paralyzed from the waist down. And honestly, I am not gonna lie, this has been one of the hardest journeys we have ever been down. I think anyone who's experienced a spinal cord injury, the spinal cord injury alone is traumatic. It is life-changing. And then on top of that, adding the trauma of him being shot by our neighbor. He's being charged with 2nd-degree attempted murder because he did try to murder my husband. And just all of that, the investigation and everything going through, our life has truly been changed. And I'm trying not to get emotional because my husband should have died that day, but the Lord has saved him and he has been with us through this journey. So as of right now, as of recording this video, my husband is back in an inpatient rehab facility because now he's had his restrictions lifted off. And so they're able to do a lot more with his rehab. And he basically states that he's in boot camp. I mean, they're working him a lot. And we kind of just have to go from here. There is special equipment that he's needing. We are still praying that he will walk again. And there's definitely hope for that. We have seen some hope, some things slightly improving, or it's kind of hard to describe right now, the things that we are seeing. One thing that people don't realize is when it comes to a spinal cord injury like his, it's not just he can't walk. It's a lot that is going on. So we still ask for your prayers. I do know that I need to post an update soon on our Support Now page. I will link that below, where I do try to post updates of how he's doing. That is also where you can go to support us. We are still needing, it's a crazy journey that we're going through, a lot of bureaucratic stuff we have to navigate, the medical system, all that. So the things that I pray for that I ask your prayer the most is obviously still praying for complete healing, that he will walk again. But also, he is in pain every single day. He's in chronic pain every day. And we are praying that we're able to get that more managed and under control. Thankfully, his nausea that he's been battling with a lot, that's pretty much gone away. It's not as consistent. Sometimes it's there. Most of the time it's not. And then another thing is he's lost a ton of weight, like a lot of weight. And so we are now needing to put weight back on him. He's basically at a weight that he is weighed at when he was 13 years old. And it's kind of freaking him out. So we're needing to build up his strength again, to put weight on him, to get him back up to a better weight. I thank you, all of you who have always consistently asked how he's doing. Again, we're still on this journey. If you haven't walked it, it's really hard to describe. But the Lord is with us, and we're so thankful for the community that we have, both online and in person, who has reached out and to help us, and we cannot thank y'all enough. So there you go, y'all. Hopefully all these answers to the questions will help. Sorry I couldn't answer every single one of them. We would be here forever. But as always, you can always search my channel, Grains and Grit, and then search whatever you're wanting to search here on YouTube. I probably have a video about that. But if you're new to milling your grains, I do recommend this playlist here, where it's all for the newbies and everything. And then also check out my cookbook on Amazon. Thank you for those who supported us. And as always, you'll have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next week. Bye.